Welcome to the 54th episode of Everyday Eternal, coming straight from the scorched wasteland that is post-Landon Mulligan legacy. With me tonight is our co-host Bob Huang.
Hello, hello.
And our other co-host Eric Landon.
Hello.
We've been trying to record this podcast for quite a while, but we had to restart it every time. Finally, Eric got it right, because every time it was his turn to welcome our listeners, he kept reanimating Grizzlebrand and putting it into play instead of saying his name. So I'm glad we finally found a way to make this work. So guys, how are you doing? What have you been up to, Bob? You're getting ready for the GP, right? Are you feeling nervous?
I'm super excited for the Grand Prix. Usually I don't get nervous. I get nervous right before round one starts. I get butterflies in my stomach. But then as soon as I start playing, I usually don't get nervous. But I'm very, very excited. I wrote an article which is coming out this weekend. Should be coming out either on the 13th or 14th. So have a look out for that. Basically in the article I kind of outline what have the decks been that have been putting up the most top 8s across Magic Online and in real life. And then kind of talk about how they match up against each other. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for the article, pretty excited for the GP, excited to see a bunch of friends. And this is really I almost feel like there have been a lot of big changes in Legacy lately. Top was banned, Deathrite was banned, Probe was banned, but I feel like we're almost at the edge of another potentially big change with the London Mulligan. So this GP could be a last hurrah if the London Mulligan gets implemented. So it could be a very defining GP for Legacy, the end of an era almost. But yeah, that's what's been on my mind. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, I'm just watching from afar for the GP. It'll be exciting to see what goes on. I wish I was going, but I'm not. But I'll probably make it to Atlanta, so I'm excited for that one.
Nice. Yeah, you're coming back to the U.S., right? Later this year?
Yeah, I'm actually in my last month now of work here in Thailand, so getting ready to make a move very soon, actually, back to the U.S.
We mentioned that last time. I think you said you were going back to Oregon. I was hoping you would go to the East Coast, so to grind a lot more tournaments there. I think the East Coast usually gets a lot better representation when it comes to that, but I think the West Coast is not that bad for example, if you're going full-time streaming, then if you start in the morning, that's already a pretty good time for to still catch the European viewers, but also catch the East Coast, and then you can keep going and still catch all of the American viewers. So in Europe, it's sometimes a bit tricky, but from a quote-unquote business perspective, going to the West Coast or even the Midwest, I think would be pretty good to get the most potential viewers.
Yeah, I think I'm going to test some different times, but I'll be starting out at least on the West Coast because that's where my family lives and stuff, and I've got a wedding to go to, so that's where I'll definitely be starting out and potentially staying. But I'm going to try out some different times and see what kind of viewers I get. But yeah, as far as paper tournaments go, the East Coast is definitely better. I'll probably do traveling for big for GPs and things like that. Definitely I'll travel as far as the East Coast for Legacy GPs, so I'll be going to Atlanta for sure. And I'll probably be going to Denver, which is closer to me, and I'll definitely be going to Seattle, and then there's also a Portland GP later in the year. So I'll get to play some bigger paper tournaments regardless.
Are you still gonna hit the Asian scene? James recently contacted me, and I think let me lie, I think it's July 20th. They're gonna have a really big tournament in Guangzhou. I hope I didn't mispronounce that. That's the Pearl River Delta, and also near Hong Kong and everything. And they're going to have one of those really big Chinese tournaments, which you and I both went to last year in Beijing. But
yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Go
but yeah, probably won't make it this time around.
Yeah, China's a little further from the U.S., to say the least.
I was looking at flights home, and they're not. It's either I'm going to get a reasonably priced one-way ticket for $600, where I have two 12-hour layovers, or I'm going to have to pay $1,000 to have not two 12-hour layovers. Still 24-hour flight.
You guys are getting ripped off in the US. Seriously, whenever I flew to China, it was €500. When I flew to Los Angeles and Las Vegas or New York, it's always around €500 with respectable airlines. I'm not gonna mention the non-respectable ones. I think those were even cheaper.
But Southeast Asia to the US is as far as is pretty close to as far as you can get.
That's true.
I think Julian, you're just kind of in the middle of everything, so you sort of lucked out there.
Yeah.
But actually, Eric, can you tell us a little bit more about like, so you're making this huge shift like to content creation. Like, what really spurred you to just say like, I'm gonna go for it?
Well, I mean, I've always just kind of joked around about it, and just like maybe I should try and play Magic for a living.
Hmm.
Just kind of as like a joke. But then somebody, actually, I think my mother said,
Really?
if you keep joking around about it, maybe you should actually do it. And then I was like, man, maybe it could actually be like a reality. Maybe it's something I could try. So anyway, I'm basically, it just, what spurred it was I was getting ready to leave Thailand anyway. Just because for multiple reasons. I don't love it here. It's super hot. That's the main reason. Um, and so I was planning to make a move anyway, and I have like my best friend since second grade is getting married, so that lined up pretty well. I needed to go to that, so and it's would interfere with starting a new semester here, and I just didn't really want to anyway. So that timing for leaving is good, and then since I'm going to be doing that, like um, I even if it ended up just being like a 6 month break, it's not the end of the world. I can go back to teaching. So it just seemed like a really good opportunity and time for me to try it. And I've been throwing out some streams here and there, and it seems like the more I thought about it, the more I like ran through some things in my head and some numbers on paper. It seemed like definitely was something that I could possibly do. It didn't seem like such a crazy long shot. So we'll see.
Yeah, what I really like about it is you will never, even if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, you will never look back in your life and be like, man, I wish I had tried. Because
Yeah.
I think you have a lot of potential. I even saw your Patreon, which we're gonna link to as well, which is I think even bigger than mine. I've been trying to maintain mine for quite a while. So you're also doing a lot of coaching, right? So we're gonna link to everything in the show notes so people can see where you are. But just quickly mention what's actually your Twitter, not your Twitter, your Twitch name. Where can people find you on Twitch?
My Twitch and my Patreon and everything is EW Landon, so it's all pretty easy to find.
So I still couldn't convince you of like adopting like a supervillain name.
Unfortunately, I think people already now know me by the email I've had for the last 15 years, so I think I'm now known by my email address. EW Landon.
Yeah, I was watching Arkan last night, and he kept talking about the big Sith Lords on Magic Online and how you are still like the biggest Sith Lord. And then there's Aurum and Lewis. So you guys are like the three biggest Sith Lords. Then I just laugh for Arkan, like how he's got this whole storytelling down. And I told him he should like actually
Archive's
make like
hilarious.
a spreadsheet or like some graphic to see who's like the Lord of the Sith and who's like, I don't know. He calls me the king of the forest Ewoks, and Mark is the king of the sand Ewoks and everything. I
Yeah,
love that
no,
shit.
we definitely need Archon on
Oh my god, we can do
one
a
of
whole
our
show.
like podcast episodes, and then like we'll like create like a very definitive mapping of like which deck is like Sandy Ewoks versus Forest Ewoks, and which deck is Sith and which deck is Force, because I'm very lost as to like all of that, but I really need to know the answer. So yeah, that'll definitely happen at some point in the future.
We should do that.
But yeah, getting back to Legacy, I guess let's talk about my article that's about to come out. So basically, what I did for the article is, again, I took the basically top nine or so larger archetypes with the most results. So this is like paper events with 129 players or more, and then Magic Online challenges, as well as special Magic Online events that have gotten, over 100 people. So basically, these are the decks that are doing the best. So I'm just going to run through them. So I lumped Grixis Delver and Blue Red Wasteland Delver together because they're very similar decks. So that's about 10%, 11% of the metagame. Next is Miracles, around 9%. Then Blue White Stoneblade, Blue White Delver together, about 8%. Then Grixis Control and Check Pile and Punishing Thieves, about 7%. Moonstompy, 6%. Ant, 6%. Death and Taxes, Slow Deaths, and Sneak and Show, all around 5.5%. So that was kind of where I started off, and then I basically went into each deck. Honestly, my feeling on the metagame is that like it's just wide open, and that like all of these nine decks I think are like have their pros and cons and are powerful options, and I do talk about how they matched up against each other. But I did it on a very simple level, if you will, because I think a lot of these matchups totally depends on your card list. It totally depends on your play skill, and so like I was actually discussing this the other day. For example, Dark Depths against Death and Taxes, specifically the slow version of Dark Depths with Dark Confidants against Death and Taxes. I'm not really sure how to rate that matchup because when I play it, I win the Dark Depths side a lot. But in general, from what I hear, like if it's like an average Death and Taxes player against an average Depths player, usually the Death and Taxes player is favored. So I don't think these like matchup guides or my matchup makings are like definitive by any stretch. But I just try to give like my best crack at like how I felt about the matchup. If it was like strategically favored for one side or for the other. So yeah, I don't know. Like, what do you guys have any thoughts on just like trying to assign a fair view ranking or rating to like this matchup versus that matchup? Like, it can be really hard sometimes. Like, it just depends on so many different factors.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. Like, I notice a lot on my stream when I'm playing against a certain deck with elves, and people are like, "What is the matchup like?" And a lot of times my answer is, it depends on like it depends a lot on sideboards because like sometimes game ones are very very different to games two and three, and most of the time the matchup I feel like I say when I'm prepared for the matchup and the other guy plays an average sideboard, I'm definitely ahead. But if everybody plays an even sideboard, then it can be a totally different story because sometimes there's certain matchups where you really, really, really need a certain card or type of card to be competitive post board. And it's sometimes that people don't include those cards. So in general, you will a little bit need to hedge your bets because I talked about that yesterday on stream. How Legacy, you have to imagine it like this big circle, and you try to cover. You've got 15 sideboard cards, and you try to cover as much of that circle with the sideboard cards you have. Or you go like the different approach and you try to like really heavily cover only certain spots, but then you can get blindsided by the metagame, by your matchups. But in general, unless you run to somebody who's like super prepared to destroy you with their deck, I feel most matchups these days are reasonable. What would you actually say? Like, what are the most one-sided matchups between actual legacy decks? Like, not something stupid, but I couldn't even tell you.
Well, Eric used to quote Black Red against Enchantress, and
Yeah.
Enchantress won a challenge. So is that a real legacy deck? But
Um,
let's see. Let's just even stick with like these top 9 decks that I listed. Um, Out of these 9, is there a lopsided matchup among them? Possibly like Moon Stompy against something like Death and Taxes or Blue White Stoneblade should be pretty lopsided in the white deck's favor.
Would you really
Uh,
say that? Because I've heard, I keep people like Marius complain about how like Death in Texas has a lot of trouble with Moonstompy at times because of like Fury Confluence and artifact destruction and all that stuff. So even that, I wouldn't say it's like too lopsided.
yeah, and
yeah,
like I
I
guess Moon
think.
Stompy's playing like more braids now, so to make it even more even. What were you gonna
Well,
say, Eric?
I think that people overstate the Moon Stompy versus Death and Taxes matchup, but I do think that Blue White should have a very good Moon Stompy matchup, and I also think that that's actually shifted the metagame a little bit more than what you discussed here. From like my playing of leagues, I noticed that Moon Stompy is all but almost disappeared compared to where it was like really good for a while. And I think it's because of the blue white deck. And I think that the blue white deck, well, when I say blue white deck, there's like a few of them, right? Whether they play Stoneblade or not. So Miracles or Stoneblade. Delver, the blue white Delver deck, I don't really see that much anymore either. But I think that deck has really pushed Moon Stompy down quite a bit because that's such a lopsided matchup. And I think people have just been jamming a lot of blue white recently. And I remember thinking that and saying something in a stream. I think it was Barras. I was like, what do we think that the blue white meta? How much of the percentage of the meta is it online right now? And I was like, is it like 20%? And then the challenge last week, I typed in Tundra into the challenge last week, and it was 28% of the decks in the top 32 had Tundras in them.
Wow.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
pretty
I
wild.
think Blue White definitely has seen a resurgence since basically Syracuse was, I would say, is the coming out of Stoneblade, as a force to kind of deal with Moonstompy, and then immediately, it's weird because I feel like usually online trends first, but I feel like Blue White Stoneblade really was Syracuse was more of a paper
Hmm.
event leading to online trends, but
Interesting.
I definitely agree that like Tundra is almost the like the largest like categorization of decks right now, and if you see in my like list, it's like number 1 and number 3, or sorry, it's number 2 and number 3. So yeah, I definitely think that is the most recent metagame shift. So yeah, if you're going to the GP Niagara Falls, I definitely expect, 1 or 2 Tundra decks to make the top 8, because they just have like basically the best answers in Legacy. One question that's kind of related to this, and I want to bring up, is that like what I find is like people, I think I think of Miracles and Delver as like good blue decks, and then like kind of like the other blue mid-range decks as like not bad blue decks, but they're just like less inherently powerful and have like they're not doing anything crazy with their mana. So, but I always feel like those blue mid-range decks, if you will, I always feel like they're overplayed and overrepresented, especially like among the quote unquote grinder crowd or what have you.
Well, I would say that about Miracles, and I can never understand why you and many other people call Miracles a good blue deck. I mean, I feel like it is a struggle for even the best Miracles players to really win with that deck, and I've played it, and like I don't think I'm playing it too poorly, and it's fine. It's definitely like I wouldn't call it a bad deck, so it's definitely a good blue deck, but I don't think it's like one of the better blue decks. I think Delver probably is, just because the whole plan of putting a clock into play early and then using your counter spells to then kill them with that clock is good against everything, while like having a bunch of counter spells and Jaces isn't actually good against everything. So I don't understand why people always talk about Miracles as being one of the best blue decks. I think it's no better than the other control blue decks like Grixis or whatever.
I don't know. What I like about Miracles is, first of all, it has one of the best mana bases in Legacy. And it also has this thing where it can really, really snowball, right? Because of ancestral knowledge. That
Accumulated knowledge.
Yeah. The ancestral knowledge. That's probably some weird card from, I don't know, Tempest or something.
Yeah,
definitely that card makes it cool. Like, it's really awesome when you start to draw a bunch of cards. But you have to like work pretty hard to get to that point in the game. And the mana base, again, it's really nice to have all these basics, but you have like double white spells and double blue spells, and sometimes like you don't get your double white on time or even your second white or whatever it is. It's like the mana base being mono basics isn't actually as like strong as you would hope for sometimes. Like, you're often using your cantrips to find the lands you need in the first 3 or 4 turns of the game, which can be a bad place to be in.
I can definitely agree that the deck could use some more flooded strands if they were legal. Because like playing non-blue fetch lands just to increase your chance of getting basic planes can sometimes be quite awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I did talk to Christopher Stitson. He's MZ Frosty on Magic Online. He was like, before you got here, Eric, he was the trophy leader for like quite a few seasons when Top Miracles was legal. And I consider him to be like, Julian actually asked a question on Twitter. It's like, who do you consider the best Legacy player in your country? And my answer was, when Top was legal, it was Topher. And then when Top got banned and Delver was great, it was Noah Walker. My dog apparently agrees with me. So, yeah, Topher is like an excellent Miracles player, and he's played the deck, without Top. And he also echoes a lot of the same things you were saying, Eric. He just like doesn't love playing a reactive strategy anymore. So I think maybe we could bump Miracles down to the other blue decks tier now. But yeah, okay. I just feel like in general people just love to play these. People just love to play like these dirtily blue decks, and I have a feeling like they might not be as good anymore, especially as the other decks have gotten better, and especially I think maybe we can talk a little bit about the mulligan now. I think that's going to change things. What do you guys think?
Maybe I'm not the right person to speak out about that at first, because like I've always been of the opinion that it's not as big of a deal as people were making it. Like, people were like, oh, the sky is falling, everybody's gonna start the game with like Leyline of the Chalice of One. And my feeling, like, thus far I've only played like, I don't know, 40 or 50, more like 50 matches probably in the new mulligan rule, and I've been enjoying it a lot. Like, to me, I feel so much less hesitant about mulliganing, because one big problem about mulliganing, not only like do you need to get the ratio of spells and lands correctly, but you also need to like still have some kind of curve, at least in Legacy. Like, if you go like land, go, Knight of Relictory, for example, that's pretty bad. But if you get some kind of action, and the new mulligan rule helps with that, like having some action the early couple of turns without being afraid to like actually mulligan to that. And I also haven't really but that's just me because I've also seen different reactions on Twitter. I've seen people who told me like they've out of like 60 matches they played against like 12 combo decks or something. But to me, it's completely different. Like I barely ever play against like
I
really
haven't
stupid
either.
decks.
I think it
You
benefits
haven't?
everybody the same. Like I think my take on it so far, I'm having a little bit of trouble deciding because I've only played about the same as you. Um, my initial take was doesn't really matter that much. But after more leagues, it's like it really matters. I mean, I think everybody's going to have a good hand every time. So I think like a mulligan to 5 is like the same as keeping a 7 in the past. Like you mulligan to 5, you're going to have 3 good cards in your hand.
Yeah,
Just like
if you got something in your deck that can eventually like mitigate that card disadvantage that you're inherently suffering, I think right now you have a much easier time. Oh, my screen just turned black because of screensavers. Okay, I'm still here. Now you have a much easier time actually implementing your initial strategy and getting to a point where it's not that much more about card advantage. Because there are certain decks
right.
like they keep trading 1 for 1 and then they're just like out of cards. Those are usually tempo decks. But in non-tempo decks, I think you have a really good time like implementing your game plan now.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
so
I
I think
think.
with go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that like I agree completely. Like both decks are just gonna have better hands, but I think this also leads to matchups being more lopsided probably. So like our friend Cliffy who won the Magic Online MCQ with Storm, he posted a couple photos where he was like, yeah, I kept a 7, turn 1 thought seized my Eldrazi opponent who mulled a 5 knowing that I was on Storm, and I just wanted to immediately scoop because his 5 card hand was like Ancient Tomb, Eldrazi Temple, Chalice, Thorn, Thought Knot Seer. So like I think like some matchups, like when both decks just like get to do their thing more consistently, then if you have a matchup advantage, it's likely to become even more of an advantage. So that was my one observation.
Just play better sideboard cards. Like honestly, like that was already that way for Storm versus Eldrazi. I mean,
Yeah,
they
but like some of
play
the time, like they would mulligan and then like they would have not so functional of a hand, and then you would just beat them.
not that often. Not that often in my experience. If they know what you're on, that wouldn't happen that often. I mean, they usually play something really good that makes you go really slowly, so then they get to play another thing that's really good before you actually answer the first thing. Um, uh, but but if you play better, like with Reanimator has a very similar issue with the leyline decks. But I mean, you play a card like Serenity, which I'm now playing 3 of. It just answers all of the things that they're doing. So I actually find that the Eldrazi matchups for Reanimator are actually better now.
Something that I've been trying with elves lately is to like not play the full playset of Leylines of the Void and just having like 2 Leylines because there's many matchups where I'd much rather have the surgical than the Leyline. For example, like against most combo decks that are not like graveyard based, I'd rather have surgical. And I feel like maybe my thought behind this is that I can create this weird strategic state where like the reanimator wants to bring in like their hate for Leyline, but at the same time I only have a couple of those, so it creates this weird situation where they need discard for my surgical and or removal for the Leyline. So by that I'm basically trying to actually increase variance in a bad matchup, so that like Bob mentioned, the more consistent both decks are, the less lucky wins you can get. So if you've got a bad matchup, you're maybe. But actually, I don't want to say you're going to have a harder time actually overcoming that because you also see your sideboard cards more often. So I don't know.
That's a good strategy, Julian. Because people are always telling me that my sideboard plans for Reanimator are no good, and that I should just be playing like more of this or more of that. But I do exactly like what you're talking about, where you just mix it up and play like 5 random things. Because if they can guess what your hate is, it's way easier to beat you. And that's my
Hmm.
experience with Reanimator. So that's why all my graveyard hate sideboards are in non-Reanimator decks.
That reminds me of my first ever vintage tournament. I was playing some fish deck, and people also introduced me, and they were like, okay, if you're playing against Stretch and vintage, just have all kinds of different sideboard hate. So I had like 1 Wheel of Sun and Moon, 1 Fairy Macabre, one the black capsule that you can sacrifice to remove the graveyard, 1 Surgical, and like everything as one-offs. And it was actually kind of weird for them to deal with it because they needed so many
Yeah.
different types of cards.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with like splitting up hate when you can. It's just like the blue decks have gotten so ingrained to playing surgical. I think that's finally starting to change. More people are playing like Tormod's Crypt or some other cards, but Yeah,
I
for a
think that's
while it was
wrong,
just
by
like
the way.
you don't like Tormod's Crypt in like I don't know, like
Not
say
at all.
Doesn't
Phoenix.
feel like a magic card.
Maybe no in Phoenix. So that's the everybody's playing it now in real blue decks. Like Phoenix wasn't like a real blue deck because it didn't play Force of Will. So Phoenix played Tormod Script because it had no counter magic. So like you can't protect surgicals in your hand, so they're kind of useless if they have discard. But like Tormod Script, you play it out. But it's definitely worse than Surgical against Reanimator. Like Tormod Script is definitely worse than Surgical against Reanimator. But now other blue decks are playing it because Phoenix played it and they thought that was a clever idea. And it's like, well, that's like the easiest side. That's like the easiest graveyard hate to kill.
All right,
and
so
you're
like
playing
what would
Snapcaster.
yeah, what would you
Just
play
play
with Blue White Stoneblade then? Like, what would you play?
I would play like, I mean, how many slots do I get here? Because I'll play. Let's say I play
let's just
5
say-
slots.
Okay, sure, that's a lot, but okay.
I would play like, okay, let's say. Oh, okay, two. I think my Bant list. I can pull it up right now. Actually, I play a lot because like these decks are really like, if you can, you don't need that many sideboard cards for blue decks, and so you just kind of need. Hold on, I'll pull it up and I'll be able to say what I'm saying better. Where is it? Here it is. All right, my sideboard for my Bant deck, which by the way, I was the second deck I played in the London Mulligan because everybody's playing Chalice decks and it's good against those. But anyway, my graveyard package for the Bant deck, which is basically Blue White Stoneblade, is 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Containment Priests, and 2 Surgicals.
Tourist? Okay.
Interesting.
Because
So a little bit of
Surgical's
early
really,
hate.
yeah,
Yeah.
really good. You want it in your opener, like you want a Force of Will or a Surgical in your opener, and then Containment Priest and Rest in Peace just close out the game. So like, I was streaming and somebody said, well, if you mulligan a hand with Rest in Peace, maybe it should be something else. And I'm like, I'm not going to keep, it's really, really good against Reanimator, but I'm on the draw, and it's the only thing I have. It's not good at all, but it's still really good against Reanimator. So I think it's good to mix it up, have some things that you want early, and then have things that just end the game. Because if you just have a bunch of Surgicals, they can also just get discarded and then they combo
I've been there with IFs. You have like 2 surgicals and you wait for them to do something because you mulligan for them and then your hand isn't all that great, and eventually they just like fade them away with like random discard or like even just going for, the Exhume and Doom Trick and stuff. It's not that great. Sometimes you really want to do something proactive that poses like a problem for your opponent in a way that they are not used to dealing with. And surgicals are probably the easiest hate to play around for, outside of maybe Tormod's Crypt.
But they are I think by far the best if you're playing Snapcaster in your deck. Like Surgical is by far the best thing you can be doing for your cheap graveyard hate. If you're playing a Surgical, if you're playing Snapcaster, Surgical is by far the best.
Gotcha. So you're basically saying like, yeah, don't play Crypt, just play Surgical, but then also play other stuff in addition to that.
Yeah, or like play 1 Crypt maybe to mix it up, but like don't replace your Surgicals with Tormod's Crypt because Surgical's just way better. Like you can brute force your way through Tormod's Crypt. Like if Surgical exiles Gristlebrand, the game is basically over.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also like a couple other decks, right? So there's like Ant, where Past in Flames is a really important card in the Blue White Stoneblade matchup.
Yeah, Tormod Crypt is great there. Really, really good against that deck. For sure. Better than Surgical by a mile.
Right.
I want to pick up
they
on
have
something.
even more discard. Yeah, I don't know. But like, I think the overall story, in my opinion, is just like, yeah, mix it up, play different hate, play stuff people might not be ready for. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't
want to pick up
one
on
Crypt.
something that Eric said. You said in a blue deck, you don't need that many sideboard cards. As in, like, you already have a lot of things covered. So I would assume what you meant is
For
the sideboard
mirrors,
cards
for blue decks, for blue decks.
Oh, for blue decks. I thought you meant in blue decks.
You need a lot
Because-
for Reanimator that's trying to kill you on turn 1 or 2. You need a lot because your cantrips aren't always going to be able. You can't like lean on your cantrips as much.
Yeah, and that's basically what I wanted to get at, because I, especially during the top era, got the feeling that a lot of people, they were trying to like get some marginal value in like blue, in the so-called quote-unquote blue matchup, and they somewhat neglected like these heavy hitting decks that you need like really strong sideboard cards against, and that's how we got like famous sideboard cards like Arib Mesa. I just can't get over that. I'm sorry, Joe, but when I saw that in the sideboard, like, yeah, that to me that was like the epitome of like inbred blue metagames. I need Arib Mesa on my sideboard.
That's pretty insane. Like, let's have the least impactful possible thing in our sideboard.
And these days, I think people often get somewhat cute with their sideboards. They don't really think about like, oh, if I draw my sideboard card, I want it to be really good. It's just like, yeah, I think this card is good, and it's, I don't know. I've always been the kind of player who wants really, really strong sideboard cards. Of course, that's also partially because I often don't play blue decks, so I definitely need some big help against some of the faster decks in the format. But overall, I like when I see a sideboard and it has a lot of like actual cool, like I'm flexing my arm right now, like really strong sideboard cards. That's what I want to see in Legacy, because that's, I think, is one of the most honest approaches that you can have. And as long as you play stuff like Snapcaster Mage in the sideboard, you don't ever get to complain about like losing to a somewhat faster deck.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the topic of sideboards, so we wanted to talk about this. So apparently the Eternal Glory podcast, so that's Anurag, Wilson, and Bryant, they talked briefly about my article that I wrote a couple weeks ago for Channel Fireball on sideboard guides.
And by talk briefly, you mean they talked shit about it?
That was mostly Wilson, but yeah. Well, what's funny to me is that like it seemed like Wilson was mostly agreeing with me, but he was criticizing the title of the article, which was, sideboard guides are a trap. But if you literally read like the first couple sentences, I say how like sideboard guides are a valuable tool, but they only get you 50% of the way, basically. So I think mostly we're all in agreement is that they're a good start and they're a useful tool, especially like say you're building a deck. I'm actually building a sideboard guide for the GP because I just want to make sure that like I have enough live cards in every single matchup. So they definitely have a lot of uses to them, but you can't just rely on them too heavily and just like always follow the sideboard guide because things can change and people can do different plans against you and you need to adjust on the fly. So that was the overall gist of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that, like you mentioned, I think Wilson was actually agreeing on the general idea that people shouldn't get too caught up in like taking a sideboard guide literally card for card, because I think you got a pretty good example of like different Miracles decks and how you would like completely differently sideboard against those kind of decks. And that's something that people should probably become somewhat more aware of, because I often get a request when I try out a new deck like Maverick or like the value Fs that I played. People come to me and they ask me for sideboard guides, and I noticed it's not even about the time that I would need to put in there, but I often feel like if I put out a sideboard guide and I give it to you, I don't think that's actually very valuable to you unless I also like type out like a paragraph or two about why I'm sideboarding that way and like things that you might want to change if you encounter different stuff. And I guess at that point it also becomes a matter of time because it's a lot of work. But like literally just very basic sideboard cards, guides, they're like an inspiration and maybe something you can use if you feel like you're totally lost. But once you get to a certain point and you want to become better with that deck, I think it's really, really important that you also like understand the underlying premise of why somebody would sideboard in a certain way. And at that point, you really got to take into account that this is not the gospel. That's not how you always sideboard in this matchup, because, like you mentioned, there's different types of the same deck, and that makes it really hard to just take a sideboard guide for granted. So you always need like some kind of additional information explanation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you guys are saying for sure. Like, I've written a sideboard guide because people are always asking me, or have always asked me how to sideboard, and so I wrote one. But at the same time, I change my sideboard frequently, and I sideboard differently daily, like very frequently. Like I'm changing how I sideboard. What I think is way more valuable is understanding or learning an approach to a matchup. Like, how do we approach this matchup? And then knowing which cards you use to lead to that approach. And then the sideboarding should come fairly naturally from there. Sideboard guides are really useful for me if I don't know the format at all. And so I don't know the matchups at all, and I don't even know what the cards are in the sideboard for. And I'm learning as I play. Then the sideboard guide is really useful. But at that point, I'm not really trying to win like a GP with that. I'm trying to learn a format. So I think they're good for learning a format. But if you're trying to like actually win a tournament, I think you need to be a step beyond what I just explained, where the sideboard guide is useful. And then the people that you're asking for sideboard guides, maybe ask them, how do you approach this matchup rather than how do you sideboard in this matchup?
Yeah, that's a really good point. You said you have to learn the approach to a certain matchup. And that reminds me heavily of something that I learned from a different game, actually. When I learned StarCraft Brood War, I watched a lot of like the Day 9 dailies, like Day 9 who's now doing a lot of Magic content. And one of the earliest things that I really learned from him was like you have to have a plan for a matchup. Like you're playing Terran against Zerg or Terran against Protoss, whatever. It's not that much about the build order. Yes, you want to execute your build order correctly, but you want to understand, like, you want to have a certain kind of approach. Like, I want to produce something very quickly and attack them this way, because for reason X, Y, Z. And those reasons might be bad, but at least it gives you, like, a standard to evaluate your plan against. And you can grow as a player because you can understand why your plan failed. Whereas if I told you, okay, you build like Mutalisk, you build Hydralisks, and those are units in StarCraft, by the way, and then you attack at this and this time, and then it doesn't work, you might not actually fully understand why it didn't work because you yourself didn't really understand the plan, like the idea behind that. And I think it translates very well into Magic, where you also, like, you want to think about certain board states or situations that you want to maneuver the game into because you know that from there you might be favored. And then you look at your sideboard and you feel like, hey, which cards are actually going to help me with that?
Yeah.
As opposed to like bringing those cards in and then playing a purely tactical game where you just feel like, okay, this card could be good. I actually am not sure why I brought it in. And that's, I think, one of the most important skills, and especially Legacy, to become a better player.
Yep.
But what I want to say is Wilson brought up something that's important. Like, he actually was making the case for sideboard guides, and what he was mentioning was like sideboard mapping, and that's, I think, was his main argument why he thought he disagreed with Bob, which I think he didn't really do actually, because sideboard mapping, where you like really you figure out, for example, you have a matchup where you have like 8 horrible cards, but you only have like 3 cards you want to bring in against, and if that matchup is common enough to face it like repeatedly, you should ask yourself, maybe I should actually like change my sideboard. Maybe I should like have a little bit more of those cards, because the marginal value I would get out of those cards is incredibly high. Whereas in other matchups, like I'm sideboarding out like a decent card and bringing in like a good card. That's like a smaller delta, right? The upgrade in absolute terms is a little smaller. So that's something that like sideboard guides help you a lot in spotting like these problems. So that's definitely a big upside.
Yeah. Yeah, I encountered that recently when I played some Eldrazi Cloud Post and faced the mirror, and it's like there are so many bad cards in the mirror, and I don't have enough cards to bring in a sideboard. So it's like, am I better off with having random useless chalices in my deck, or random useless like Leyline of the Voids in my deck for the mirror? Because there's literally nothing to bring in.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, right? If that matchup was common enough, then you would, like, the way that you plan out your sideboarding before the tournament, you would spot that problem.
Yeah.
And you would try to find a fix for that. I think it's probably not a matchup that you would, like, worry too much about. At least that's my approach. Like, I pretty much do what Bob did. Like, I look at the top decks, the most played decks, like here, the top 9 decks. And those are literally the only decks I care about at all when going into a big tournament. It helps when you're playing a proactive deck, because then even if you face something that's a little bit weird, you can still like out proactive them, like executing your game plan, and then you still win. Whereas if you're playing, like, for example, I don't know, a deck like Miracles, people always sometimes say that struggles with weird decks. I think Miracles can just overcome weird decks by the power level of like its cards, like Terminus and like Chase, Snapcaster. So that's a lot of good cards, and I think one of the cards that helped it the most recently over the recent years is Countess Judgment. That's something that the deck had been missing for quite a while, at least in the main deck. But while we're at that, guys, what do you think of the new card that will allegedly destroy Legacy as we know it? Which, at least if you go by... well, actually, okay, here's something. I've been mentioning Blue Chat a couple of times, and Bob has cautioned me to not call it Blue Chat anymore, and instead refer to it as my Legacy friends, so it's not that cryptic thing anymore. So me and my Legacy friends, we talked about we talked about this new card, the new Teferi. 1 colorless, a blue and a white. Planeswalker comes into play with 4 loyalty. It says that you can play... Oh, guys, help me out. You can play sorceries on your opponent's turn as if they have flash or something, or actually anytime they have...
No. So okay, I'll read off.
Oh no,
the
no,
card.
it's the other way around. Yeah, we got Bob in here to do that.
Yeah, so Teferi Time Raveler, 1, a blue and a white, so 3 mana total. Each opponent can only cast spells when they can cast a sorcery. It starts on 4 loyalty, +1 until your next turn. You may cast sorceries as though they had flash, and then -3, return an artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand, draw a card. So that's the card. My initial thoughts on it are, at first I was like, wow, this card's great. But then I realized I'm like looking at this lens from a blue player, like against like a non-blue deck. It really like sure you can bounce a chalice, but like then they can just recast it, so like it doesn't even fix that problem. Um, my dog is really really
It's not that
annoying.
loud. It's fine.
Okay, so the issue is that they can just replay the card, and but the biggest upside to me is the fact that it costs 3 mana and it replaces itself immediately. So I don't know. Those are kind of like, sorry, I just keep getting distracted. Give me one sec. You guys can talk about it.
All right, let me respond here to what Bob just said. It only bounces a chalice. I mean, from like, okay, this card in my, I don't know, I might be wrong. I haven't really talked about the card that much because, I mean, I don't want to talk in hyperbole or anything, but the card seems like crazy to me. Like, if you're a storm deck or a show and tell deck, like bouncing a chalice is a pretty big deal, and the fact that like none of your cards can be countered is a pretty big deal. Like this is a must answer from a deck like that, and it has like this built-in game one answer to stuff like chalice that you don't already have because it's not useful enough to have chalice answers against blue decks. So now you've got like this card that's just insane and against blue decks, and it can answer a chalice. Like that's pretty crazy to me. So I think in a combo deck, like I'm thinking like Storm's gonna want to play white, Show and Tell's gonna want to play white. I could even see like Miracles maybe wanting this card, but it doesn't really feel like a control card to me. But we'll see.
Okay, that's interesting that was your first reaction, because my first reaction was like, oh yeah, let's play this in Blue White Stoneblade and Miracles. But then I thought about it some more, and it's like, what are the most common ways for blue decks to attack Miracles and Blue White Stoneblade? It's with True Name Nemesis, Red Elemental Blast, Spell Pierce, and like this card lines up poorly against all of those things. So from a blue mirror perspective, like what are you cutting for this? Are you cutting Council's Judgment? That makes you even weaker to True Name. So like from that perspective, I see the card definitely has some flaws. Obviously, it's great when it's in play and they have nothing. Then you get complete control of the stack, which is extremely powerful. And like you blank like 10 cards from your opponent's deck. So like it definitely has its uses in blue mirrors too. But what you were just describing was in combo decks against blue decks, it turns off all their counter spells, which is like their main axis of attack. I agree that that's extremely powerful. It remains to be seen how easy to cast it is, because it is 2 different colors of mana in a combo deck, and it also you can just Spell Pierce, Rabbit, or whatever. But I think it has a ton of potential, and it's probably the front runner for legacy relevant cards in the set. But there are definitely a bunch more. Yeah, I don't know.
What about that Nissa that you tried to sell to me, Eric? Isn't that like a new 5-mana Nissa that you were like?
Oh no, that was me. That was me. And you're like, this card is trash. Never play it. And I was like, oh okay, I'm sorry.
And I said I think it's good because I was a little bit surprised that Julian said it's unplayable, because it really looks very similar to the Nissa that Julian played for a long time.
Hey, don't disrespect.
Wait,
Nissa,
it makes your land into a creature. Like, isn't that all the other one did too?
Yeah, but this one turns into a 0/0 creature. You said, right? That's why it's bad.
Oh yeah, so it kills the land.
Well, no, it gives it like +3.
I know, it gives it counters.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
I thought that Eric was just trolling me at some point.
Some of it might have been. I don't even know anymore.
I think basically like the other Nissa had like the other 2 abilities were more relevant than the 2 abilities on this Nissa. So the other Nissa was just like strictly better is basically what.
Yeah, for the other Nissa, like she had 2 amazing abilities, like the hasty creature that attacks Chase, and also like remains a 5/5 on their turn, so it's really good at blocking. And the ultimate was just busted. And one of the big thing, and the minus ability came up every now and then. But the big thing is, you cast this usually on turn 3 if you have it in your opening hand, and then you get the ultimate on turn 4. And the ultimate gives you the emblem that whenever a land comes to play on your turn, you draw a card. Like every fetch land draws you 2 cards. And if you don't draw a fetch land, at least you drew a business spell probably, or like at least a creature. So this card put a lot of pressure on your opponent to like do something about it. Whereas the other one, it's like you cast it, you get like a 3/3. Hey.
Okay, you've made a good argument.
Yeah.
I don't know if I actually made a good argument against
It's
it.
a worse.
It
makes a worse creature.
Yeah.
And the extra mana that it makes is completely useless, because if you're casting a 5-mana spell in Legacy, I mean. Doubling your lands is kind of dumb.
I think the other one, actually, if you have Cradle, produces even more mana because it animates Cradle, and then you get to untap Cradle with Wildwood, same with Quarian Ranger. Whereas you actually don't have that many actual forests and elves, so I'm not even sure. I guess I brought the card up, so let's not discuss it.
Okay, well, let's go back to Teferi. I do want to talk about a couple other cards too, so I don't want to spend too long on Teferi, but overall, I would say like the floor of this card would be like maybe something like a fringy Planeswalker. I think it's going to be better than like something like a Johnny Vengeant or whatever. And the ceiling of this card would probably be something like I don't think Narset sees any play. Johnny.
No, I know that's an example of one that everybody hyped quite heavily for Miracles and sees zero play.
I would say the ceiling would be something closer to like maybe Liliana the Last Hope, which is like matchup dependent, but can be very powerful in that matchup. So that's kind of like the range of where it would be. I'm leaning towards it's closer to the ceiling than to the floor. So yeah, do you guys?
I would actually argue that the ceiling is even higher. Because when you're playing a Blue Mirror and you untap with that card, it's gonna be super devastating for the opponent. You get to do whatever you want to do pretty much, and they can never really fight back. Even if they have like counter spells, they can't use their counter spells to protect their own spells. Mm-hmm. It's gonna be devastating.
The problem is like. So it's really hard to generate card advantage with Teferi because you can only minus it once, and then you need to take up a bunch of turns before you can like minus it again. So, but again, it just costs 3 mana. So I don't think we've quite seen a Planeswalker that is quite like Teferi before. So, yeah, I mean Wilson was like really down on it because he was like, you're paying 3 mana, you're not really answering anything per se. And like you could be falling behind on tempo. Plus, this card is easily answered by a lot of things. So yeah, I don't know. I've definitely heard like lots of different opinions. I've literally heard people who are like, "Oh, this is gonna be Jace," and a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is literally unplayable." So like, this is definitely like.
I think I agree with what you said with Liliana the Last Hope, where that card's really really good, but it's not like people are gonna play 4 of them or anything, even though it's a three mana spell. Like. You do see 4 of 3 mana spells like True Name Nemesis, for example, in some decks. But I think that it's a little bit I don't know if you would call it the ceiling at this point, but I think that it's going to have a slightly different or higher impact on Legacy because I do think, like I said, I think potentially something like Storm and Show and Tell might want to play white, which they haven't really in the past. Like I think for Storm in particular, like it being a must answer spell, yes, you can answer, but it's a must answer spell, and you're playing a deck that like your opponent, if they're on a blue deck, they're already going to have trouble deciding what spells to answer. Now you've presented this one that they have to answer, so you get to sculpt the game around that, and then the fact that it does have like built-in game 1 answers to literally anything, or a lot of problem cards like artifacts that you don't have game 1 answers to in general. I think that's if I'm right about that, that's a much higher impact than Liliana the Last Hope had on Legacy, because it's going to change the way that a lot of popular decks are built.
So I was going to say, it's like, if you're splashing white for the card, is the card even better than Orim's Chant then? Because it does pretty much the same for a turn, which is often all you need.
Like
and
that
the upside,
green enchantment.
Yeah, the green... Oh, City of Solitude?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I see that the upside, of course, over something like Orim's Chant, of course, is that you get the minus ability, but how many matchups are there actually where you take advantage of them not being able to counter your stuff and them having something that you want to remove, like a Chalice? I think the only one that comes to mind is maybe something like Blue-White Stoneblade, when they have like either Swan Canonist or something.
Well, it's not that's not that you have both in one matchup. It's that you have a use in every matchup.
Or like a Swiss Army Knife card.
Yeah, I mean, just like against blue decks, now they can't counter anything, so that's why it's a must answer. And against the other decks, it's not dead. It's even though it's less impactful, it does. Now you have this card that can answer chalices that you didn't already have answers to in your main deck, and now you can.
So the idea would be that something like Nauseam Tendrils, they would cut something like green probably from the deck and play white instead for this card, and then play
and then they probably cut it in the sideboard in games, but like you have this use for it in game 1, and then like in game 2 and 3 you would probably put in something like Disenchant over it if you're only using it.
Now you actually got me excited for the card, because I want to see is that, like, I honestly want the card to be playable, even though I'm not convinced it is, because as much as like Marcus and Anorak were like super excited about the card, I was like pretty anti the card.
I don't see it as a control card. I think they're going to be highly disappointed with what it does in a control deck. I think in the mirror it'll be really good, because now you get to cast your stuff and your opponent doesn't.
I wonder if this will incentivize people in the mirror to actually have red blast and blue blasts again, because lately the trend has been like going away from playing red and miracles or even Stoneblade decks.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's Teferi. Let's talk about a couple other cards that I think are exciting. So I think a couple ones that we don't have to talk too much about, but are obviously just upgrades. Like, for example, Liliana's Triumph is a better Diabolic Edict that will easily just basically replace anybody playing Edict. Um, a couple other
Can't target
cards.
yourself though. So
Yeah, you can't
Reanimator would
target
probably
yourself,
still
so
want to play
like,
Edict.
I mean, okay, that's just like a silly argument. I'm not going to entertain it. Bolas' Citadel is interesting from the Storm players I've talked to, and me looking at the card too.
Can you
It
mention what the card
obviously
does?
okay. It's really it's really long.
It's not that complicated.
Okay, so basically it's 3 and then 3 black, so it's kind of similar to Ad Nauseam, but costs 1 more. You may look at the top card of your library and then play it at any time. Or I guess you still have to follow if it's a sorcery. You have to play it as
Yeah.
a sorcery, but you can pay Phyrexian mana basically for its cost rather than its actual cost. And actually, you have to pay Phyrexian. It's not like you get the option. Then you can also sacrifice 10 non-land permanents to drain for 10.
Or
So
is it
from
actually
what I
Phyrexian mana? I think you pay like Phyrexian mana would be 2 for 1 mana. So you just pay the converted mana cost, right?
Yes, sorry.
life.
So
Yeah.
so like if you play a dark ritual, you pay 1 life. From what I've heard from the Storm players, it doesn't quite fit in Ad Nauseam Tendrils or TES. But there could be a build of Storm that could play this card, perhaps with like land grants, perhaps with like Mox Opals, because it's an artifact. And like it's just good at like it's really good with like Chrome Mox and the artifacts if you just hit more artifacts. So there could be a different Storm build out there. Jury is still out. Most people are leaning no, just because like these kinds of big flashy cards are really hard to build something that's like better than Ant already. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
It probably won't see
Is it
play.
an
If it does see
artifact?
play, it is an artifact. So if it does see play, it could be an exciting new combo deck. But
Goblin.
um,
Somebody's gonna do something with Goblin Welder. Otherwise, I think that card looks pretty unplayable. Like I don't think an ant shell. I think you could make something janky, but fun with it, but not like an ant deck. Like you said, I mean, the ant deck's already perfect.
right.
This card's definitely not better than what Ant's already doing.
Okay. Next card I wanted to talk about. This card is also pretty exciting. I probably don't think it's there, but it's the ceiling is extremely high. Is 2 mana Dreadhorde Arcanist, a colorless and a red. 1/3 trample. When it attacks, you can cast an instant or sorcery with CMC less than Dreadhorde Arcanist's power without paying its mana cost. So this casts Ancestral Vision because you don't have to pay the mana cost. And like the ceiling for this card would be like you a couple scenarios, like say you bolt something turn 1, you play this guy turn 2, then you attack and you get a free lightning bolt. That's pretty good. Then if you're like doing crazier things with like Ancestral Vision, that can be really good. So it's just like a Snapcaster Mage that triggers on attack. The downside is it's constricted by its power and that you need to actually attack with it. You don't need to connect with it, but you need to attack with it.
Yeah,
So
when I first saw that card, and to this day, I'm surprised people haven't been talking so much about that card, because to me, that's probably one of the biggest cards that has been spoiled for Legacy yet. Might even be the most important one, because this card, like you mentioned, it triggers on attack. It doesn't need to connect. It clears its way. Like you get to Lightning Bolt before they go to blockers. And the card, to me, at 2 mana, seems very, very reasonable. This feels like the kind of card they would have, like in the past, printed at something like 1, a red and a red, but now we're getting it like this. I mean, I could end up being wrong, but I can definitely see this in some kind of blue-red shell, like where you also get to flashback your brainstorms. I don't know, like if the kind of card lends itself to working itself into like an Ancestral Vision decks, because Ancestral Vision decks really want to go long most of the time, and I think they're set up. I guess you could technically like thought score it into your graveyard and then get it back that way, but that's already asking for a lot to go right. But overall, I think, especially because of Lightning Bolt and this triggering on attack, not on connection, is a pretty big deal.
I'm in the opposite camp. I'm surprised we're talking about it at all. I really am. I had never heard anybody talk about this card for Legacy.
So-
I think that it doesn't do anything when it comes into play, and we already have like you said, Snapcaster and lots of other and the mission briefing and
so it's like a
you even have the
weird. It's like a weird
pass-
mix of Dark Confidant and Snapcaster Mage, but you need to enable it. But if you do enable it, it can be pretty powerful. Like in Modern, for example, it synergizes well with like Become Immense. So I think people will definitely try this card in the Become Immense Shadow Zoo deck. In Legacy, I'm just like, I'm not sure because there's no existing shell around it. And if you play it in something like Blue Red Delver, well, that deck's really just trying to like kill you really quickly. It's not necessarily trying to like go up on a million cards, but going up on a million cards is always just good. So I don't know. I'm very intrigued by it. I haven't thought too much about like decks to build around it, but I might give it a go because it is very powerful.
I think so. For something to be played at 2 mana that doesn't do anything when it enters the battlefield, there's like three that we see. Young Pyromancer, don't even see a whole lot of, but this card like leaves behind dudes if so like if they answer it. So kind of replaces itself in that way. Bob replaces itself if you untap, and Tarmogoyf is almost impossible to kill. But I mean, none of these cards see that much play, and so this card, I think you're right, actually, that like it's close to like a Young Pyromancer because if you attack with it, it kind of replaces itself. It's close to Bob and Young Pyromancer in that way. Tarmogoyf obviously is
Yeah,
different
you don't get the immediate value with a Pyromancer. You could get some immediate value by going like Pyromancer Cantrip or whatever.
right.
So like if you just top deck this against control deck, they're like, okay, cool, answer it. Like so it's like a snowball type card.
I think it's like close to as good as some cards that are not played very much in Legacy. So
well,
that's why I don't think it's going to be played.
what cards are like not played that are like
No, that's why I
better?
said Dark
don't know.
Confidant and that are better that are not played. Well, I mean, just seeing it more in the slot like Dark Confidant or Young Pyromancer, which aren't played that
Okay.
much
Yeah, that's
already.
fair.
And I think
It
those
could
are
be
probably
like
better.
I think you're probably right. Obviously, Dark Confidant has some like restrictions around it as well. You don't want to play. Generally, you don't want to play Force of Will with that card. Whereas this card is totally fine with Force of Will. I don't know. I would say like there's a chance it sees no play. And there's actually a small chance that it's actually a very good 2-drop. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Next
So,
card. Yeah.
by the way, so I guess in like a couple of months from now, we're gonna come together, and Eric is gonna tell us how this card in his sideboard from Black Red Reanimator is gonna change like the Miracles matchup and
Oh
everything.
shit! I didn't even think
You
about
played
that.
every single sideboard card.
I didn't even think
imaginable.
about it. It's gonna be busted in Reanimator. You can recast your Reanimates,
Yeah. If they killed one earlier, you can reanimate your
and you can
Arcanist.
sacrifice it to therapy.
Ooh, you can. Yep, that's always the key. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, moving on. A couple other cool cards. So there's this card Neoform that could be interesting. I don't think it'll see play, but it's green and a blue for a sorcery. As an additional cost, sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a CMC equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter. So like people are joking with like, oh, you play Mirror Enforcer and then you play Grizzlebrand, but like what Mirror Enforcer deck is possibly gonna get like green and blue?
Yes, this effect has been around forever, and none of them have been playable. So this one's
So
not
yeah,
gonna
I'm
be
like,
playable.
I think
played
in
both of
modern
them.
it has a lot. Like you can definitely build around it. In Legacy, it's just like too easy to counter and like too much setup. Um, so we can skip over that one. Next card is Tomic Distinguished Advocist. By the way, do you guys know what an advocist is? Is it just like someone who advocates?
I would
Yeah.
imagine. How do you spell that?
Advokist.
Kist. What? That sounds really weird. Well, actually,
Okay.
if I Google for it, the first card that comes up is Orsov Advocist, Commander
Okay,
of
it's actually not even an English word, so I guess it's just like some guy who goes and argues like a lawyer or something. But the card is 2 white for a legendary 2/3, flying, lands on the battlefield, and land cards in graveyards can't be the targets of spells or abilities your opponents control. Your opponents can't
that
play
one.
lands from graveyards. So, this turns off like Wasteland, Rashadan Port, Thespian Stage, Vampire Hexmage targeting Dark Depths. So it's very much like a Dark Depths hate card. Thomas Enevoldsen's first reaction was that it was unplayable because like he didn't felt like he needed help in that matchup against lands or against Merit Lodge. And it's like not that, you know. But the way I look at it is it's like a Sarah Avenger that, has 1 fewer power, but it still has flying. And it doesn't have vigilance, but has like this other ability. So it's like if you're in the market for playing Sarah Avenger, there's a good chance you would rather play this card instead. So I
What's
think
its
there's
power?
that's a 2/3 flying. So it blocks Delver. I think it like has a chance of seeing play. I don't think that it's gonna like change the format. It's definitely gonna be very annoying for Dark Depths decks, but I'm not even sure that it'll see play. And if it does see play, it'll be Fringe. So it's also a
I,
legend, so you can always Caracas it as well.
I could see it being a one drop. I think one problem the card has is that you can't recruit off the guard for it because it has 3 toughness. So it's gonna be a little bit harder to find, and you don't really want to play like multiples of this because, like I mentioned, there's some matchups where it's really just like a nice creature that like a 2/3 flyer that's not cutting it in Legacy. But overall, the card is quite exciting. And what's exciting me the most about the card actually is the backstory of it. David Humphreys, who's like, I think he goes by Magical Principal Game Designer. Yeah, that sounds like something. um, Wizard said that he was unhappy with Death and Taxes having trouble with dealing with Deathwhite Shaman. So because they are designing sets very far in advance, he actually like put this card into the set and as a way for like Death and Taxes to fight Deathwatch Shaman. And now we know Deathwatch Shaman has been banned for quite a while. But the first time that, or not actually the first time, they also did it for Mental Misstep, where they acknowledged that this card was printed for Legacy. But for the first time in quite a while, Wizards really went out there and said, yeah, we printed this card for Legacy to like address balance issues in Legacy. And that overall just makes me happy that they would actually like do something like that, not completely ignore the format, because we know they're always quite vocal about not testing like even modern when they make changes. But when the principal game designer actually feels like, hey, like I imagine him to be like, he's like this Death and Taxes guy, and he's like reading everything about Death and Taxes. And he's like, screw you, Deathwhite Shaman. I'm gonna print a card in like 2 years. That's gonna be pretty good against you.
All right.
Yeah, that's
well,
funny.
how about if they ever listen to this, stop printing hate bears to answer Fringe decks in Legacy. Like there are so many Fringe hate bears already that Death and Taxes has access to and doesn't play, and I think this is just yet another one, like another two.
So what do you want? You want more Thalias? Is that what
No,
you're
just
asking for?
No, I've stopped printing things specifically for Legacy Death and Taxes. Like they've already got enough tools.
It does seem like every supplemental set, like they've gotten Council Judgment, Recruiter of the Guard, Palace Jailer, and all these cards have like
Well, there's the
taken
one
a while
that
to
you can
catch
sack
on.
decks out of the graveyard too. There's there's a bunch of them.
Right.
There's
I'm
the
mostly with
flying
you.
Thalia. There's the new Thalia that leaves behind a token when it dies. There's like 16 different Thalias, but we only play Thalia because it's good enough.
You know, as a way for like to allow Death and Taxes to play all these cards, Wizards is gonna announce that the minimum constructed deck size is gonna go to 80.
Yeah.
And then you probably also increase the number of cards you can play. But actually, that kind of defeats the
Play
purpose.
more recruiters. Play more recruiters and one of every hate bear ever printed.
That could be a new format.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next card I wanted to talk about was Karn, the Great Creator. 4 mana for a Planeswalker. Starts on 5 loyalty. It has a couple abilities. Static ability of activated abilities of artifacts your opponent's control can't be activated. +1, you make a non-creature artifact into a creature with power and toughness equal to CMC. -2, you wish for an artifact and put it in your hand. So this one's also pretty interesting. I think it could definitely see play in something like Eldrazi Post. What do you guys think?
I feel so stupid for mentioning that red card we talked about earlier was going to be the biggest card in that set, because now we come up with like all these actually relevant cards. I think that Karn being like four color is always the sweet spot for the Soul Land decks, and Karn having a decently relevant ability while also allowing for like that's the big thing people talked about, right? You get Micosant Lantith from the sideboard, which I feel is like a 6 mana artifact that says everything on the battlefield is an artifact, and then the static ability, or is it like, yeah, it's everything on the battlefield is an artifact, and then the static ability basically stops your opponent from ever doing anything because his lands are artifacts, and so he can't really tap them for mana anymore. I think that's how it works. Like the Micosant Lantith thing might be too cute. I could actually see it being playable in like a dedicated Soul Land deck. Definitely in Vintage, like where you have Workshop to like get this card out even quicker. I'm quite excited to see what Karn will be doing in Legacy.
Wait.
It's not an artifact, so you can't play it off Workshop.
Oh, see? Oh, game loss. Warning. Okay.
I think we really have to see how strong these static abilities are. I mean, at the very least, it's got to be strong enough for a sideboard card, right?
I think the decks who would play Karn would probably play it in the main. I would assume.
Yeah, if it's good. So if the static abilities are good enough, I mean, because like the loyalty abilities just aren't as strong. because they have these static abilities in general on most of these planeswalkers. So it really kind of depends on if the static ability makes up for the weaker loyalty abilities.
I mean, the static ability is pretty narrow. So what does it do? It like stops equipment and
It's
ether
like
vial.
Nyrods.
Does it stop? Wait, what is it again? It stops activated abilities if they're not mana abilities.
No, it stops mana abilities too. So
No,
it's
so it's
basically
good
null
against
rod.
like
It's a
Lion's Eye
one-sided
Diamond.
null rod.
Yeah, so that's pretty good in
Oh,
some
that's true.
matchups.
Okay, I mean 4 is a lot to ask for against LED, but I guess if you're playing Eldrazi or whatever, then you're probably able to buy time and bridge into that, so it's still relevant. That's good. And like you can just wish for a card that just beats them pretty much. Yeah, I like that. Like, I don't know if like is the right word because I generally don't like these artifact decks, but it definitely gives them access to answers that like they can play in their sideboard now. So like you can just like wish for an ensnaring bridge against Sneak and Show or Delver.
Yeah.
So I think it's a powerful card, and I expect it to see some play. Set is actually just insane. Like almost every set, we just see like a couple playables, like Arclight Phoenix or whatever, and even that is like not guaranteed. But then this set is just like, hey, try me, like put me in your deck and see what happens, you know?
Yeah, I thought this was
Does
a
the card-
special set, not a standard set.
Does the card get artifacts or non-colored permanents?
Artifacts, so you can't
Oh,
get,
artifacts,
like you
so-
can't get
okay.
like all his dust or something like that. But
Okay,
still,
I was won-
it's still a lot. Like you can get like, well, I was thinking of Modern Tron, but you can get like O Stone. You can get some sweepers, I think.
Okay.
You could put O-Stone in the sideboard of Eldrazi Post. I mean, the Eldrazi Post that I played this last week, I put 4 All's Dust because I think it's really good against the blue-white decks that are running around. But having an
Yeah, and
O-Stone
it
in
answers back
sideboard,
to basics.
yeah, so that's pretty good.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So next card, Finale of Promise. This one's pretty exciting. I can't tell if it's Niv Mizzet or Nicol Bolas in the art. I'm sort of a fan of the story. I don't follow it that closely. But anyways,
Bob
here's
is,
the
like,
card.
Super big lore nerd. He reads
Yeah.
all the novels, watches the movies and stuff.
Exactly. Actually, BBD like did a podcast on his podcast, and then he called it like Lore of the Spark. So I'm excited to listen to that one to see BBD's rendition of the Magic story. But anyways, onto the card. It's X red. So CMC2 plus an X. You may cast an instant and a sorcery from your graveyard, each with converted mana cost X or less without paying their mana costs. If X is 10 or more, you copy each of those spells twice. So again, because you're not paying mana costs, this works with cards like Ancestral Vision and Living End and what have you. So they're just printing so many cards that let you access those spells. But so like, what is the scenario with this card? You could go like, this is not very exciting because it's burn, and burn is really bad, but I'll just say it for the sake of it. You can go like, what, turn 1 Swift Spear, turn 2 Lightning Bolt Chain Lightning, turn 3 Finale of Promise, and then they're just dead. So that's a turn 3
quickly?
kill.
So
Yep.
sorry, remind me again. What does the card do? I just thought about like casting Living Dead 3 times in a single turn.
Yeah, you can cast an instant and a sorcery basically,
Yeah.
without paying their mana cost.
But what's the mana cost of the card? That's the part I missed.
Oh, it's red X.
Red X. So
So
you
you
can
pay 3 mana to cast 2 bolts basically.
Yeah.
What other applications are there for this card? It's a sorcery, so like you could use it to cast like Brainstorm and Ponder, but that's just like not good enough. So I feel like you would have to be doing something broken with the 0 drop spells or playing burn, and so like just from that perspective, none of those really appeal to me. So I don't think this will see play, but it's, I don't know, just like another card that is potentially
Basically, you
powerful.
brought it up because you like the artwork.
I think it will not see
Possibly.
play. I think that if we already have access to cards that do these things, such as casting Ancestral Visions, and they're not already played, then I'm going to say it's probably not going to see play, and I'll probably be right most of the time.
Okay.
But
All right,
if
last card. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last card
Yeah.
is Contentious Plan. 1 in a blue, sorcery proliferate, draw a card.
Sorry.
Also,
what?
people were talking about this card with regards to Throne of Geath or Geth,
Geth,
whatever.
yeah.
So
It's
well,
1 in a blue for a sorcery, so 2 mana, proliferate, draw a card.
So you can change Chalice on 1 to a Chalice on 2, which also stops future Chalices on 2 from coming down, and you draw a card. Basically, it's a Throne of Geth that cantrips, and technically can also, like, I don't know, like ramp your Planeswalker up. But I think like people were talking about this card in the context of Death Shadow, which is also the kind of card that play a deck that played Throne of Geth. I could
think
see the
Infect
card
It's also
being a
blue.
separate card.
It's also blue.
This could
It's
be a
blue.
great
Oh,
infect
sorry,
answer
that's actually pretty
to
important.
Chalice.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of just like a card you could put in the sideboard of Shadow and Infect. Basically, any blue deck that's weak to Chalice but doesn't have many 2-drops, you can go ahead and just play this card. And if it has some other proliferate benefits, that's nice too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it has to be a deck like exactly like Infect or Shadow where and even Infect, like you don't really want to proliferate to 2, but you do get that Infect proliferate, which could be nice. But Shadow doesn't have many access to many cards that answer Chalice, so that's why they play these weird ones.
So one more card that I saw on Twitter. I'm actually not sure if it's in the next set, but I think it is. Yeah, it probably is. It's that Chase card. It's like a blue and 2 colorless, and I think it's a sorcery. You draw 2 cards, and if you control a Chase Planeswalker, you draw 3 cards. Is this card gonna see any kind of play? Because basically it's like Painful Truth, but it's blue and doesn't cost you life.
Well, Painful Truth sees no play, so...
It's a
Some
divination
people
unless you have
insist
a
on-
Jace, so no. Because if you
And when you have a Jace, are you like, do you really need cards?
Yeah, you know what? Somebody in my legacy friends earlier today said that if you have a card that reads "If you control a Chase Planeswalker," is inherently win more immediately.
Yeah.
That is really funny. To even think of that, you need, to get more benefit out of your Jace.
If you control Nicole Bolas Planeswalker and your lands are untapped, then this draws an extra card. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So guys, I think Eric is not gonna go to the GP. I'm also not going. Bob, you are going. You're probably pretty excited. You definitely won't tell us what you're gonna play. I'm not gonna. Probably it's gonna be a lure.
I'm like probably playing depths at this point. There's an outside chance that I've been testing a couple of matchups which I've been like kind of unhappy with depths. Specifically like the Knight of the Reliquary decks are pretty tough, but I don't think there'll be that many of them. Storm is also tough. Sneak and Share is not great, but yeah, I'm mostly decided on it unless I change my mind and end up playing Delver.
You should play
those are basically-
Reanimator.
Maybe if you can.
Reanimator's
coach me-
busted with this. Oh no, they're not going to have the London Mulligan. Never mind.
Yeah,
play
they don't
what
have
you,
the
play
London
what you know.
Mulligan.
But
They should call it
Reanimator's
the
honestly
Landon
going to be.
Mulligan.
I mean, back to the Mulligan discussion. Reanimator, I feel like the deck. I think it would be really good at that GP if they had the London Mulligan rule.
Yeah, and people aren't fully ready for it.
And people don't really know how to play the. I'm noticing with the London Mulligan rule that I think it's going to increase win percentage for higher skilled players because they're going to be able to utilize this Mulligan better. I think.
I like
Just-
that.
Yeah. So, but it's not going to be live at the GP, unfortunately.
Do you think Reanimator is going to start putting up like a lot of results again? Because I want to say Reanimator never
Absolutely,
really
I'm
put
going to
up.
be in the US playing at these tournaments next year. It's definitely
Okay.
putting up results.
Yeah, because like when it first came on the scene, it put up a good number of results. But then like ever since then, you've been like the only person putting up a lot of results. So that's always been like kind of surprising to me that
People don't
either-
really play it still. Like people still don't really play it, but
But
I do know
Anorak
some
played it
people
last
try it
night.
every
People
once in a
play
while.
it. People play it on Modo
they ask
and
me
then just like
questions
get
how to play it.
frustrated. Yeah.
Yeah, but they play it poorly. But like, I've had some people like. You remember Ole Rade was playing it. He was crushing with it, and
True.
Said's been playing it recently. Mental missed up on MTGO, and he's been doing really well with it too. And he's discussed it a little bit with me and thinks it's really good as well. I think if good players play it, the deck is insane. You should try it. Run it through a couple
will.
leagues. How about we do a league together soon? I'll do one.
Yeah, I'm
with you.
down.
Yeah, consider it like a promotion for Eric's stream. Or more like a promotion for Bob as a personality. People actually mentioned Bob as the best legacy player of the US, and Bob heavily disagreed with that. But I think the question itself that I posted on Twitter was like super awkward and was somewhat geared towards people like answering in interesting ways.
Someone said Eric was the best player, but I don't know if that was in the United States or in Thailand.
Jeez.
Have you ever played Legacy in Thailand?
No. I'm the
You
only
say that
legacy
like
player in
it's-
Thailand, so I hope I'm the best.
Have you ever considered like playing in like PTQs or something like, or a
I
friend
have.
of mine?
I actually messaged once. I don't have any. I don't want to buy standard decks. I haven't really. They're an hour and a half away from me, and I'd have to buy decks and stuff. So no.
Okay. A friend of mine, he's German, but he has like a Vietnamese background, and he always wanted to get on the Vietnamese national team, but then he learned that he would actually, apparently there's like something he has to give up his German passport or something and move to like Vietnam and live there for half a year, and he was like, yeah, okay, I'm not that deep into it.
You just have to register your DCI in that country.
and just pretend that you're Vietnamese. Actually, you could.
No,
pull
you
it
just
off.
have to register your DCI there. Like I'm registered in Korea still, I think.
So, guys, you got anything more to add? Like, do you have like some special allegedly pro player tip for the people playing in the GP on the weekend? What's your secret to doing well?
I don't have any secret tips per se. I think Legacy is this format where like whoever's put in a lot of time over the years, it's going to be a pretty big benefit. Not that you can't pick it up. Like say you're a pro and you want to pick up a blue deck, I would definitely recommend something like Delver. They can definitely pick it up in like a week or two and do well with it. But I don't think there are going to be too many pros there. There's no coverage, which I'm sad about. They didn't let Honorog do coverage either. He was going to do like rogue coverage, but they said no. So there's no coverage, and the Pro Tour or the Mythic Championship is the week after. So a lot of pros are going to skip this event. So I'm a little bit sad about that.
So do you think one of the 9 decks that you initially posted is going to take... Like, what are the odds that one of those 9 decks will win the event? What would you say?
That's a lot of the format. Let me like do a back of the envelope calculation. So it's like 11, 20. That's like maybe like half the format, and it's like some of the better half of the format. So I would say that there's like, I don't know, maybe like a 70% chance, 75% or higher that one of those decks takes it down. Maybe even higher.
I think we'll see one of our big legacy names win the tournament, and those people usually play Miracles and Delver and Storm. So I think it'll be Miracles, Delver, or Storm that wins, because it's going to be one of those guys. Might be you.
So I'm calling it like the finals will be like Cyrus and Storm against some guy on Miracles that we have heard from before.
Just anybody but Honorog.
I was gonna say Anorak because he was the first guy who came to mind. Anyway, so
yeah, I think
that's
Cyrus hasn't won a tournament in at least a month or so. So I think I put my money on him as well.
Also, shoutouts to Humans of Magic. They did an amazing interview. James did a really great interview with Cyrus CGI. Cyrus Corman Gill, one of the most accomplished Storm players as of late, with a like. I don't want to call it like an interesting backstory because that's not really setting a world well. Like, it's quite troubled, but well, now here I am calling it interesting backstory. You should definitely check that out. And for me, I want to give shoutouts to Basti Hofmeister, and the name is Hegel on Twitter, so I don't know their actual name, who made donations to running of the show, which we are going to use to like host this, because that's actually like a recurring cost that's coming up there, and also to put this on SoundCloud, which is also a recurring cost. So thank you so much for your help. Everything you want to contribute, we're actually going to set up a dedicated Patreon for Everyday Eternal, because people ask me about how they can like support the running of the show, and otherwise, like if I link to my own private Patreon, that's sometimes a bit mixed up. So I'm gonna set up a Patreon. It's probably gonna be at patreon.com/everydayeternal, unless that's already taken, which I hope it's not. So if you want to support us, if you like what you hear, it definitely makes a difference, and we are still gonna come up with a couple of perks. Like, I had some private talk with Bob that people can get for like $50 or more or something. No,
you described it as a romantic session, a romantic Skype session.
Yeah, and you liked that tweet, and not the tweet, that message. So maybe you're gonna put that out. So. Also, thanks a lot for the people who send out reviews on iTunes. We're actually getting a lot of reviews on iTunes lately, which is like super nice, because forever this show has never had any reviews, and now we got like 7 in like 2 weeks or something. You can also like us on Spotify. Like, we're on Spotify. You can also leave a review there, which like we don't have one on Spotify, so you can be the first one. With that, I'm gonna say, well, Eric, it's super late at night for you. Bob still has like a lot of the day to enjoy. Bob, what are you gonna be up to this weekend?
I'm actually playing a team tournament tomorrow, so last chance before the GP, so I'm excited.
And you're playing depth?
Yep.
So good luck with that. Everyone, thanks a lot for tuning in, listening to all of this, and see you again next time when we finally come up with a good catchphrase to sign out the podcast. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye.